Welcome everyone to another one-day community event. It is my pleasure to interview Paul Cappuccino. Paul, I couldn't resist.
Hey!
I could not resist. I could not. As a fellow half Italian who somehow manages to get my name mispronounced, I just, yeah, bad one. Anyway, let's start that again. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to interview Paul Capriolo. My name is Stephanie Melodia, and I'm a fellow mentor here at One Day. Paul is entrepreneur in residence at is it PortfolioT, Paul, or PortfolioT?
PortfolioT.
We're just mispronouncing left, right, and centre today, aren't we?
That's a much funnier name.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, Paul is an entrepreneur in residence at PortfolioT, a stealth mode venture studio with a rich background in founding, managing, and exiting multiple successful businesses in the loyalty, advertising, and gaming sectors. Paul brings a wealth of experience to the table here this evening, so I cannot wait to get stuck into today's conversation. Paul has also applied growth hacking techniques across various industries and has held pivotal roles ranging from founder to head of growth and chief marketing officer. He, of course, specializes in marketing as well as sales and growth initiatives post acquisition. He is an invaluable resource for anyone looking to navigate the startup landscape. So, if you are lucky enough to have Paul as your mentor on the One Day program, then you are indeed very fortunate. My name is Stephanie Melodia. I rarely do my own introduction, but that's my name at least for anyone who doesn't know who I am. Paul, welcome to our One Day community event.
Fantastic to be here. And thanks for having me, Stephanie. I look forward to chatting.
Likewise. All right. So super interesting to rewind the clock, start at the very beginning. I was so amazed to see that your first official role was co-founder. You went straight into business.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned this was around university time. You didn't know what you were doing. You were figuring things out. So take us back to that moment. And I'd
Mhm.
love for you to share with us what was the biggest lesson that came from you just figuring it out back in 2007 in those early days.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to tell the story and sprinkle in some lessons along the way. I started my first venture after my first year of grad school, and I was in at Carnegie Mellon doing computer science, and a couple of my friends, computer science friends, and I decided to, instead of getting summer jobs or internships, we wanted to take our roll the dice and see if what we could build. And I think like many first time entrepreneurs, we started to build things that we just thought were cool. I didn't do any customer discovery. I thought, hey, I'm the customer. I know what I like, and I'm just going to build stuff that I like. And we started programming. We went right into product building. We built a uh, one app was called Issue Dictionary, which is a way for folks to basically say which candidate find out which candidate most aligned with their views by taking a quiz and then being matched with candidates. I think this was the 2008 or 12 presidential election is where it started, and then we built something for the Nintendo Wii, and ultimately like we kept building and building, and then we lifted our heads and we said, wait, how do we get users? How do we make money? What are we doing here? And luckily we saw this explosion in Facebook apps. This was a new concept at the time, Facebook apps. And the two most popular apps in the world, one was a hockey game, and one was an app that raised money for breast cancer research in partnership with Susan G. Komen. And we said, wow, like this is incredible. Like we can make one of these. Let's make one for Toys for Tots. And we reached out to the charity and said, hey, we want to make you a Facebook app. They said, like, what is that? And we said, well, we're just going to make you one. And here's one that's making a ton of donations. Let's see if we can do this for you. And they said, all right, go for it. If you're going to give us donations, like just please, give it your best shot. And we reached out to this company that was making this Pink Ribbon app in Boston because we wanted to use some of their tech, and they ended up acqui-hiring us. So we didn't need to figure out how to get customers, and we didn't need to figure out how to grow. And we got really lucky there. But that was really a good first lesson, which is, you need to understand who the customer is and why they'd use it and how you're going to acquire them. And then in Boston, we built a loyalty platform and we sold that to Rakuten, which is still around. It's called Rakuten Loyalty. We worked with banks and airlines and sports teams and everyone in between to offer different loyalty programs for them. And after that was acquired by Rakuten, one of the co-founders and I, Patrick, we wanted to get back into the Facebook and gaming space in particular. And this was at the time when there was all these popular apps like Farmville, these kind of I mean, they were social games. They weren't very like exciting games, but there was a social element. And we saw the way that these Facebook games were being monetized was through kind of very low quality advertising. And we had just come off selling this loyalty company where we had worked with the biggest brands and retailers in the world, like the Walmarts and the Amazons and every, the who's who of brands, about 1,500 brands. And we said, well, let's bring these brands into the gaming ecosystem. This is where hundreds and millions and billions of users are. And it's, a 10x versus like the loyalty sandbox we were just playing in. So that was really the first big success that I had, which was a company called Social Growth, where we actually pivoted a few times. Originally, we were going to make games, then we were going to build advertising into our game, and then do like an A/B test with other monetization platforms, and then ultimately open the monetization platform to other folks, third parties. We ended up building our game. It was called Superheroes. It was pretty fun. We didn't get that many users, but it was pretty fun. And then we jumped right to the monetization platform because we were like, why are we taking this long, winding road? Let's like just jump to the end game and realize our vision faster. And that was a big success. We reached 300 plus million active users a month. We worked with thousands of brands and we drove hundreds of millions of dollars of ad revenue for these brands. And we got to kind of sit in
Yeah.
the middle and take a little bit of a toll for facilitating the transactions and tracking. And what I loved about this, and I don't love all forms of advertising, I don't think anybody does, but what we built was a way for gamers to really engage in a way that allowed them to earn. So this was incentivized in a way. So if you're playing a game and you wanted to earn an extra life or earn some gems or whatever a currency was in the game or earn like an item, you can engage with these brands in cool ways. And some of these brands came up with really cool experiences. Some of it was just, watch the video, buy something at Walmart or sign up for Netflix. We worked with folks like that. But it was a win-win-win because the user got something for engaging with the brand. It wasn't something that was net detractive from the experience.
Yeah,
And
amazing.
yeah,
Cool. Can I just jump in here? Because that
go for
was
it.
loads to unpack here. So that's
Yeah.
amazing. I would love to deep dive a bit more into the social growth journey. Exactly as you
Mhm.
said, you managed to achieve hundreds of millions in revenue, hundreds of active users per month, partnered with thousands of brands. So loads of amazing lessons from that. And I'd love to hear about what happened afterwards. I just
Mhm.
want to take it back for everyone, just underscoring and popping in the chat two key mistakes that I heard you say kind of at the start to underscore for all the listeners here. Number one, thinking you're the customer and not doing any research or customer discovery. And I guess linked to that is the over focusing on product development instead of, again, the customer and marketing. So, just in that vein, there,
Mhm.
what would you advise as the best type of market research for conducting those early stage customer interviews? And we'll dive into social growth.
Yeah, my philosophy on venture building has changed drastically since then, and I see things a lot more clearly now thanks to my experience. What I do now and what I would have done differently then is I would have led with customer discovery. And my favorite form of customer discovery is open-ended, qualitative discussions. These are asking questions. What are your top three challenges? What do you do in your free time? These are asking questions about people's experiences and their past, not about their future, and really understanding the pains and the gains that they have in order to be able to then ideate the right solution to address what you learned through these open-ended customer discovery conversations.
I love that. And just sticking with that for a second, in a world of efficiencies and scaling up, do you have any tips for how you can scale up that one-to-one qualitative customer discovery piece? Or is it literally founder-led, you as an individual having a human conversation, one-to-one to one-to-one, to get that,
Yeah,
a sizable
that's a
opportunity?
really good question, and I think the entrepreneur, myself included, wants to take the shortcut. I think there's no shortcut here. So I think a lot of people will say, "Oh, surveys, like I can reach a lot of people and ask a bunch of questions." But the real problem with that, and I strongly advise against it in the early stages, is you can't ask open-ended questions and you can't have follow-ups. There is no shortcut, 100%, like well encapsulated. So I do think it's a one-to-one conversation where you can pull at different threads and you can listen for things and you can say, "Well, why do you do it like that? What? Tell me more about that. Oh, that's it. I haven't heard that before. Like, why and how and what? What does that? How does that impact you?" And you
Mm,
can't. There's no one would ever do a survey where you just had. They would have to ultimately write a book for you.
mm,
Um,
absolutely.
and you don't ever know where the conversation will lead because you don't know what you're going to hear. You come with a
Yeah,
few open-ended questions and then you let it, probably like we're talking today, like it just kind of flows.
absolutely. I totally get it. And I guess I guess that's kind of a point of reassurance for anyone who's feeling a bit fearful of AI, the impending doom, it's all coming for our jobs type of thing. I think inherently, as part of that process, we are not marketing to users. We're not trying to get downloads. They are people, they are humans on the other side of it. And so going deep, having those open-ended conversations just mean like it's very human to human. So I actually love that you say like, well, this is one of the areas in entrepreneurship that there is no shortcut, there are no efficiencies. You have to have that human to human interaction with them and go deep and allow the space for it to kind of go open there. Just sticking with this for a
Mhm.
second as well, what I'm curious about is, feel like it's all very like well and easy to say that, especially with this crowd here, we've got early stage entrepreneurs, either pre-launch or very early stage of the launch. Your top priority, and this again is a message for all the one dayers, your top priority is on the customers. Understand what they want, solve a problem that they have. How, I guess, in an ideal world, Paul, if you would start again and approach venture completely differently, how would you be able to continue that customer interview, that direct closeness, that human to human interaction as the business scales?
Yeah, that's a great question. As a business scales and evolves, so does the customer. Either the customer is changing or you're expanding the types of customers you're serving, the points in their journey that you're able to impact and affect, different parts of the ecosystem. So you're always, I mean, growing implies that there's new things coming in, new things happening. So you need to be able to understand, where do I need to go? Should I build this or that, right? Or should I target this new customer or this new part of the journey? And where can I kind of fill in those adjacencies from my success to date?
Yeah, amazing. I love that. I remember hearing a story of this bank CEO years ago who would make it priority at least every single week to still go and visit the branches and just spend time in the actual retail units. And even if it was just watching how people were behaving, having a chat with the staff that were on the front line, I just found that so incredibly inspiring. And this is the CEO of this top bank. So I absolutely love that. All right, Paul, lots of great lessons and tidbits there. Let's go
Hmm.
back to social growth. So as a
Yes.
recap to everyone, so you had kind of an aqua hire with your first business,
Mhm.
built up from there, loads of lessons learned, built up social growth. Do you remember what were the top 1 to 3 traction channels that worked for you to achieve that incredible growth with social growth?
Social growth was driven off of channel partnerships. So it was really for me, a lot of cold outreach and then using one success to snowball into the next and into the next and into the next. I didn't start by reaching out to the biggest. Well, our partners were the game developers, the game companies, like a Zynga, for instance. So I didn't start by reaching out to the biggest ones. I started with the small games where I felt like I could make mistakes and learn, and we were both kind of learning together. And a success led to a case study and some great content, and then I piggybacked off that to get the next customer, and kind of built that feedback loop and cycle for social growth.
I love that. I love that. It reminds me of another interview, which was around someone's angel investment strategy, actually. And before they went for the big dogs, they just leveraged they just needed to get those first few over the line and then leverage that as the social proof and credibility to then get the next and the next and snowballs. So I love that.
Yeah,
So you
and
mentioned kind of, sorry, go on.
well, I was just going to say, also what we were doing was really kind of a two-sided marketplace in a sense, because we also needed to engage with the brands. And I use the same strategy there. Like, working with, say, a Coca-Cola, they're not going to work with you if they don't know who you are. But if you can
Yeah.
say, hey, I ran this for this beverage company and this CPG company, and here's the success and here's the data, it's just starting small and then working your way up to the head.
It makes it easier for them to say yes, doesn't it? Which is ultimately the goal with these things. So you
Hmm.
mentioned cold outreach. Was that the same on both sides of the marketplace? Were there any other channels that worked for you with social growth?
It was really, it started with cold outreach, and then it was like leveraging connections. So, hey, we did a great work for you, brand A. Like, what other brands that do you work with? Or we would work with an agency that may work with 100 brands. So we would crush it with one and then go to them and try and, hey, like, who else needs this? Who else, we did great. Like, what else can we work on? How can we grow the budgets with success? So it started with cold outreach because I really didn't know anyone in the space. And then it was kind of leveraging the success to build the network and get the next connection and get the next contract.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, I can see this was between 2009, 2016. It still sounds like this was incredibly ahead of the curve, even for back then. So super innovative, really impressive. So what happened next? Were you able to exit social growth?
We were, there was a couple of things that hurt us along the way or challenged us along the way. One was that Facebook picked winners, which is rare in a market like this. But Facebook said, okay, we're only going to work with these three platforms, and we weren't one of those three. So, like, what do you do? So we kept working with those three, but that hurt. And then during that time, the world shifted from Facebook apps and games to mobile apps and games, and which is where it is today still. And it's different audiences, it's different brand experiences, it's different brands and advertisers and different goals and different marketing teams and different agencies, and it's all sorts of different things. So a lot of it was kind of like starting again from zero. And we were able to essentially like reboot or reformat for mobile away from Facebook. And we were acquired by a company called Kiswi, which is a mobile video streaming company that has some incredible video streaming IP and tech that works primarily with sports teams and leagues and esports. And they were looking for an advertising platform basically for their streaming tech. So that was a real easy match, and we had a good successful acquisition through that.
Nice. Well, congratulations again. What an incredible career. And we're only like a third of the way through, even if that. So incredibly impressive. What also comes to mind for me there, listening to your story, is perhaps like an over reliance also on some of those other like tech giants. Like you mentioned, Facebook basically decided, like, is there anything you can speak to that, I guess, more so as it relates to product development itself, around not allowing yourself to be at the mercy of such a behemoth that can control your destiny at a whim?
Yeah, it's a very scary spot to be in, and unfortunately, sometimes it's unavoidable. Right? If you're making Facebook games, you're at the whim of Facebook. If you're making apps, then you're at the whim of Apple's developer policies and Google's developer policies, and they can change, and you could be riding high and number one in the App Store today, and tomorrow you're banned, and like that can happen. Uh, the way maybe to talk a little bit at a higher level, the way I think about ventures is as risk reduction factories, and entrepreneurs are risk reducers. And and there are certain risks that you just can't avoid. So some obvious things that people do are, they'll try and build an email list off of, say, a social platform, so then they own the customer, or they'll try and go from Amazon to Shopify where they can own the relationship, which is great, and you should do that if you can. Sometimes you can't, and that's okay because I mean, the reason why these are walled gardens is because they like the Apples and Googles of the world and Facebooks, they know the size of the prize. They know what they have and the value of what they have, and they know that they can make the rules. So if you're, as long as you understand that risk and the investors understand that risk, then sometimes you just have to live
Mm,
with it.
yeah, that's an excellent point. Like they know the value that they have. And sometimes, I advise people, especially if they're building like anything around communities or marketplaces, you have to meet the customer where they're at. It's going to be so expensive, so time consuming, so much effort to try and drive all these customers, all this traffic to something that you're building up from scratch with like zero brand awareness. So in the early days, there are all of these, these tech giants that you can leverage. But I think like, especially in the creator economy, like there are so many creators who are making sure like they own the data. Instagram can change an algorithm tomorrow and then you're screwed. So I think that there's a level of leveraging the tech tools as much as you, or the platforms as much as you can, but then like trying to regain that control once you build it.
Yeah, there's never a way, I think, to reduce the risk to zero because you're not building
Yeah.
every platform yourself. Even let's just say you get
Mm,
you turn your social followers into an email list. Well, then
mm,
you're still at the whim of how you're managing that email list. Maybe a MailChimp, maybe another provider, maybe it's a HubSpot, and they're changing their policies and rules too. So you really can't reduce it to zero, but you can reduce it, and you should if
yeah.
you can. But if you can't, Godspeed.
Yeah. No, I love that. Okay, amazing. So moving on. So I can now see kind of the next steps in your career is going into employment, right? Employed roles. So head of growth at
Hmm.
Zentel, entrepreneur in residence, venture builder. How does having a normal job compare to being an entrepreneur? And have you got an itch to scratch to go at it again soon?
I'll answer your first question or your last question first. Yes, I have an itch that has never left me. And the reason I joined my friend's business as head of growth is because as I was exploring I was teaching myself AI programming and exploring some business ideas, and I just did some customer discovery, and I wasn't confident that I had something that I should pursue. I couldn't find the conviction. So concurrently, like while I was exploring these ideas, I had been working out of my friend's office, Zentail, which is the role you're referring to that I was head of growth at. And
Hmm.
I started to get like sucked into these meetings. So I would like to say I would hear the sales guys talking. They'd be like, "Hey, Paul, like, can you join us and just like tell us what you think about this?" And they were ready to raise their Series A, and they're like, "Hey, we want you to be head of growth." And I was like, "This is incredible! I get to work with my friends. I get to work on all these fun growth opportunities, and I get to be part of this raise." So,
Nice,
but yeah,
amazing.
it's a lot different working for someone than it is starting your own thing. But there are similarities. The freedom is something that is always a challenge, I think, for entrepreneurs to get over.
Yeah, no, I totally relate. All right, so now through that lens,
Hmm.
as a head of growth at Zental, that was a more recent one. It looks
Yep.
like you left that kind of couple of years ago. Now, of course, you are advising others. You're, of course, fellow mentor on the One Day program. What are you seeing as being the most common blockers, or what's the advice that you find yourself having to repeat the most often to budding entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I've also been an entrepreneur in residence at University of Maryland for almost a decade now, and so I've talked with hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs through One Day in Maryland and elsewhere. I would say the biggest issue that I see entrepreneurs running into, especially newer entrepreneurs, is that they shy away from risk. And I think at One Day we call them like spiky questions or something like that. But
Yeah, yeah, running into the spike. Yeah, yeah.
it's like the entrepreneurs put their head in the sand, and they don't want to be told that their idea stinks or that nobody's going to buy it. So they work on everything else besides validating the pain or the gain. And then it's just like a hope and a prayer. They launch, and then they learn whether it's going to be a success or not. And that's just not the way to build a venture. That's really the way to ultimately waste your time and reduce your chances of success.
Yeah. But
You got
there's
to run into the
definitely,
risk.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get it. I do agree with you, and it's funny. I can empathize you obviously to a certain degree because what I definitely see, one of the biggest blockers is not taking action. Is people just not, not going out there, not executing, and it's similar to your point on not running into the spike because as long as it's in your head, you don't know if it's right or wrong. You don't get to be proved wrong if it stays in there.
Hmm.
And the same thing with not running into the spike. And it's very counterintuitive, but I guess it's again, it's refocusing back on the customers, the market. If you don't have that, you simply don't have a business. So it's kind of like choose your poison. Would you rather avoid the upfront uncomfortable, asking those uncomfortable questions for longer term gain, or kind of treading water for a few years and letting the market give you the answers slowly but surely?
Yeah, I see it a little more harshly than that, but I do agree with your sentiment broadly. It's almost like you're constructing a bubble for you to live in. Like you're not, and
Mm,
you're not letting anybody, you're not inviting anybody in that could pop the bubble.
I
But I
love
see it
that.
as almost like, for me at least personally, the way I think is it's freeing. Like if I can invalidate my idea quickly, it's like in sales, like you want to getting to know fast is good. Not
Yeah,
like getting to know slow is bad. Like if you are an
yeah,
entrepreneur and you get to know slow, then that's all that time, treasure, talent, resources, everything you could have been spent working on something else, your next idea, or anything else. Because you're literally throwing kind of the good after the bad. And I also think, to your point, Stephanie, one thing that I don't really see a differentiation of is risks and assumptions. A lot of people say that those are, risks and assumptions. That's like a phrase, right, in the entrepreneurship. But assumptions are risks. It's just like it's something that you don't know, that you don't
mm,
have conviction about, and if you can't realize, if you don't kind of within yourself see the difference between an assumption and knowing something, then it's going to definitely bite you in the butt at some point.
yeah. Paul, absolutely love that, and that has definitely resonated with the audience here as well. We've got all the messages coming flying through, and people definitely resonating. That if anyone takes anything away from this conversation with Paul this evening, then I think just rewinding to like getting to a no slow is just the worst thing. Like you want to
Hmm.
fail, you want to fail fast, you get to those no's, run into the spike, do it, overcome that discomfort, do it and do it quickly. I love that. Lots of great messages here from the gang tonight. All right, Paul, steering the ship back towards kind of that growth, looking at things through that growth lens. So I've asked you like what have been kind of the biggest blockers. Conversely, then, what are some of the best tips, the top 1 to 3 tips that you give early stage founders as it relates to growth? Now, I know it's different for different businesses and different sectors, but any kind of pearls of wisdom that you can share with our audience on that front?
Yeah, I've done a few growth workshops here for Oneday, and I think it's really trying to create a creative and innovative data driven experiment framework. And what I've done is built like a Google sheet for these workshops, and it's like, what are your hypotheses and what are you trying to impact, what and how do you measure that, and how quickly can you get feedback. And like that's kind of lessons 1 through 3 in a cluster, if you will. It's
Mhm.
it's like you want to reduce your time to learn, just the same way you want to reduce your time to a no. Like
Mm.
time is your most valuable resource, definitely in entrepreneurship and in life more broadly, if you want to kind of get beyond entrepreneurship. And and the fat and like your learnings per minute is a really important metric that you want to optimize to. And when you're in your when you're in growth mode, as in like you have something that you want to grow, you have some conviction that you know your customer and you've built something that solves their pain or really unlocks something valuable for them, then you want to run as many growth experiments as you can that don't overlap as fast as you can. And most of them don't work. Just like entrepreneurship, like most companies don't work.
Yeah.
Uh, so how do you find the one that works as fast as you can?
I love that. I love that. I've just popped in the chat there, LPM, learnings per minute. So like that is a top metric for early stage entrepreneurs. That really, really resonates, Paul. And I think just to
Mhm.
add, like I had a real enlightening conversation with one of my founders last week where they've really embraced the scientific method. They're really embracing like the experiments. And they were like, look, if we find out that it's a zero or that there's a no, we still found out something new.
Yeah.
It's still a learning. We still tested it, we got an answer, and we move forwards. Paul, I would love, as a fellow marketing professional, I would absolutely love to get your take on performance marketing in
Hmm.
this day and age, especially as it relates to startups. And, we're kind of halfway through the year 2024. I feel like so much has changed, and especially within the marketing landscape. What are your hot takes on performance marketing before I sort of prod you a bit more on that one?
Okay, yeah, performance marketing was the sandbox that we played in at Social Growth. So it's probably changed a little bit since I was in there, but um, I love the idea of performance marketing because it aligns incentives. So at the highest level, let's just say I'm working with an Amazon. They want to drive sales. They don't want clicks or views or impressions or whatever. Like, they want to drive sales. So if they can pay you on the acquisition or the sale, then you're incentivized as the marketer to deliver what Amazon wants, and Amazon's going to pay you for that specific action. So I love performance marketing. I think uh, where where it can struggle is when you don't have the audience that's actually going to take the action, but they still can add value to the brand. So maybe you can drive clicks, but maybe where you are in the customer journey, they're not ready to make a purchase then. So then it might not work for you. And attribution has always been a huge issue and complaint in performance marketing, right? Like, someone sees an ad 5 times on Facebook, and then they Google, like I do, like everyone else, like coupon for flowers.com, right? And then you click on the coupon code, and now all of a sudden that coupon website gets 100% of the credit of the sale. And all of those like upper funnel actions, you either can't track them or you can't reward them. And folks are trying to come up with all sorts of silly attribution models, but I've never seen one that I thought really hit the nail on the head.
Interesting. So much of that really resonates as well. So I used to run my own marketing agency specifically for startups, and the more that time went by and the more that we kind of ran all these different tests and things for our clients, the more out of love I fell with the whole game of performance marketing. And I think, like, at heart, I'm very, very much a branding gal. So I love that you mentioned kind of the brand part of the equation there.
Hmm.
Uh, I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well. So I felt like I put in so much incredible effort in applying a lot of the numbers and statistics and financial value to brand. I felt like there was this fight against it being perceived as the fluffy stuff, as it's not measurable, we can't attribute it. But then you look at these incredible brands and like the value of the brand and how much that lifts up all the rest of the marketing and everything else. But I just felt like I was banging my head against a brick wall. I'd love to hear your expanded thoughts on, I guess, like how valuable you think brand is, and what you can speak to in terms of like attribution, the argument for it, and how much a startup can realistically invest in brand in those early days. I know there's a lot there, but just kind of
Yeah,
pick your favorite.
I think brand is extremely important. And there was just in the last week or two something from Nike, who's been suffering a little bit, and one of their executives said that they stopped brand building because it wasn't measurable, and it's really hurt them because when it's brand building is so valuable, but it's also so hard to measure. And if you only master what you measure, which is generally true, then you do miss on some of these like hard to quantify or impossible to quantify attributes. Now, as a Nike is obviously not a startup. If I was a startup, I think brand building is important, but I wouldn't build brand in the same way that a large brand builds grows itself. I would do more something like content, become an expert, become an authority, build a community. Like, these are great ways to build brand and engage with potential customers, and also learn about the ecosystem and the who's who, and find partnerships and collaboration. So brand building is important, but definitely a different path towards brand building.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that front. And when you mention community, building an authority, do you mean personal brand by those terms?
I've never tried to build a personal brand, I'm just referring to the venture brand. But I do think building a personal brand is also valuable. I- I've always been curious if building a personal brand and building a brand for your business simultaneously, if there's a conflict there, as in like you're kind of like siphoning one or the other. Uh, but I don't know. I've never tried to do it.
Yeah. I love that. And I guess like digging into sort of early stage growth strategies. So
Mhm.
you talk about, let's kind of break down. So you talk about community, content, building an authoritative position there. I guess how much time, energy, effort, and specifically like budgets would you be able to split out across all of that stuff that's harder to measure versus the Facebook ads, the performance
Hmm.
marketing?
Yeah, well, I don't think I'm going to answer your question exactly how you framed it, but I always shy away against any paid media as a startup until I have conviction. Conviction that I understand I have, I have a product that and the customer and a market that I think I know how to approach and tackle. Um because you don't have a lot of budget. So if you get it wrong like one or two or three times, and I just mentioned like it's all about like finding the experiment that works, right? So
Yeah,
if as all of your experiments are paid and it takes you till the 10th one to find something that works, if it ever works, you might be out of money, right? And then when
yeah,
the worst thing to do is like find something that works and you don't have the time or the treasure to scale that channel.
yeah.
So
I
I
love
think
that you say that.
go ahead, Stephanie.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I love that you say that just because I think there is a lot of that, that fail fast mentality that came from the OG Silicon Valley crew, which is so deeply rooted in an invisible privilege, right? It's like, well, you might be rolling around in it backed by SoftBank and you can afford to take these sorts of risks, or you have a friends and family round. The vast majority of us, and especially in the spirit of one day's mission of democratizing entrepreneurship, exactly to your point, we don't all have those limitless funds to keep kind of throwing money at things. My kind of counterpoint to that, though, is just, and I'm seeing this with my own cohort as well, is performance marketing always seems to be that kind of easy default channel to go to when you do want some results and in a quicker amount of time. So one, yes, you can go out and do
Yeah.
direct outreach, cold outreach. You need to put in a lot of energy and hustle. And to be honest with you, there's likely to be a cost incurred there as well if you're going to use a tool, some sort of automation to help you along the way. Organic social doesn't get you anywhere. That yields tumbleweeds. I mean, unless you've got incredible content and you stick at it for a long period of time, but even
Right.
that, you're not really getting that statistical significance. I can go on and on through the channels, but I think you're on the same kind of wavelength here, which is, are there any other marketing or sales channels or experiments that you could advise where people don't always have to keep defaulting to paid social to run those rapid experiments and get the results that they're after?
Yeah, I would it obviously depends on the venture and the industry and the ecosystem, but I always start by taking the approach of, when who is my customer and when are they experiencing the pain the most that I solve? Or when do they wish they had my product or service the most in their day? And how can I meet them there? And maybe that's when they wake up and they're dreading going into the office and having to close the books at the end of the month. Or maybe it's like when they're really feeling the pain and they Google search for something, or they're looking for a resource or an article. So it's I start there. And then like
I love that.
if paid social is how to reach them at the right time with the right message, then that's okay. But I don't kind of default to something like that.
Cool. I love that answer. We are absolutely kindred spirits, if not ancestrally related through our
We'll figure
Italian
that out.
stallion fathers here. No, I absolutely talk about this all the time. I always talk about, when we say the word marketing, it seems to be wrongly kind of used as a synonym for like social media, whereas we all forget actually about the majority of the word itself, market. Let's start with your market. Where are they? And I love how you just talk about kind of the pain points, meet them where they're at. I'm very happy that we're using Growth Levers by Matt Lerner for this next tier that we're going into with my squad at least. And I always recount his locksmith moment. Do you know about Matt Lerner's locksmith moment, Paul?
No, please share.
It speaks exactly to your point, which basically he recounts the story when he was head of growth and PayPal over in San Fran back in the days. And he was coming home after work, after a long day at the office, and he was about to, like, type in his code in his keypad to get back into his apartment block. And he noticed a new sticker for locksmith that he'd never noticed before. And he was like, oh my God, light bulb moment. If I'm ever caught out, this is exactly the moment I'm going to need to call a locksmith. So kind of use that, and it's a really good thought exercise. Exactly, just doubling down on Paul's point there, which is who's your customer, what is it they need, when are they experiencing that pain point the most, and meet them where they're at, aka your locksmith moment. All right, Paul,
That's
I'm
a
going
great
to ask
story.
you.
Yeah.
So you have to read the book. Honestly, it's
Okay.
fantastic. There's a reason one day I have been inspired by some of his stuff in the next iteration of tier 2. So yeah, highly recommend. So we have got some questions coming in from the gang. Please
Sure.
keep them coming through. And just to give you all some time to type out, Paul, I'm going to ask you my final question, which is, given your wide aperture in business, you've started, scaled, and exited your own companies. You now advise many, many other early stage entrepreneurs. What is the hallmark for you of a good business idea? So before there's any validation or traction to back it up, what do you know? What are the few things you look out for that demonstrate this is a good business idea? We're onto something.
Yeah, if I'm just like sitting on the couch coming up with ideas, or it's like something pops into my head, so like pre-validation, you're asking, right, Stephanie? I would Some of the early, mental checks I do is, what probably exists today, or like why wouldn't this already exist? Is the market big enough, right? Is this exciting if it works? Is it clear? Can I articulate it clearly and thoughtfully, or is it still like fuzzy in my head? And then, is this solving a real deep pain, or is it unlocking something really significant? Or is it just like a nice to have? What's the phrase that I'm looking for? It's like the vitamin versus the painkiller.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. Yeah, vitamin
Yeah,
fail.
yeah.
Vitamin, as you say. I love that.
Mhm.
Amazing. Cool. Fantastic tips. Absolutely, like golden pearls of wisdom there. Thank you so much for that. All right, Joseph, before I come to your question, I'm actually just going to scroll up a second because I know, Joseph, you mentioned earlier, actually, you're excited to hear about Paul's growth tips. So, Paul, growth tips for Joseph, his business is digital headstones,
Yeah.
memorial etchings on digital headstones. And then he's asked, working on my approach in my customer discovery is a bit nerve-wracking. Do you have any suggestions for an approach to possible customers for interviews? So a few things there. So what would you do for like the digital memorials for Joseph, and any tips for customer interviews?
I made a customer discovery introduction to Joseph this morning. He was on an earlier growth workshop, and my father-in-law has a memorial business that I thought that would be a good conversation. But like generally speaking, I think ask for help and be genuinely curious. So approach things like you're at the early customer discovery phase, you're not trying to sell anything. You're actually just asking someone to have a conversation about what they live and breathe and are passionate about. So it should be fun for everybody. It should be really educational and enlightening, and just be really curious. And ask, if you don't know like exactly how to approach it, ask broad questions and then start pulling threads from there. Like, what are your top 3 challenges? Like, what do you wish you could do that you can't? What's like the most stressful time in your day? What if you like what would you do? How does this or that impact you? Like these types of questions. They're kind of true for almost every venture generally, but then from there you can say, oh, well, why does that happen, or why do you do it like that, and really start to build an understanding of the ecosystem and the journey map and the stakeholder map. And these are like foundational things in order for you to figure out, if you're onto something or not. So that's what I would do,
Fantastic.
Joseph. Mhm.
Fantastic. And Joseph, so great that you joined another session earlier. You're obviously taking action and trying to find out ways to reach a solution. Joseph, what I would love to hear from you in the chat I'd love to understand a bit more about what you find nerve-wracking, specifically about the customer interview process. Is it just that you're not landing on a traction channel that's getting much movement? Is it that you just, from a personal standpoint, you just feel, are you more introverted? Like, let us know if there's anything else. In the meantime, doesn't look like there are any more questions, so I'm just going to go over to our quiz, ladies and gentlemen. It is quiz time to see if you've been paying attention to Paul's fantastic questions. You can scan the QR code on the screen, or I'm just about to pop the link in the chat. Paul, while everyone fills out the quiz and we see if they've got their answers right, we've had a question in from Scuba Joe, if that's your real name.
I
Starting
hope
from a
so.
dead zero traction. Yeah, me too, right? Me too. Scuba Joe, first of all, we've got a question for you. Is that your real name? But Scuba Joe's question to you, Paul, is starting from a dead zero traction, what strategies would you recommend first to start with? It's a great one.
Well, I'm curious, but I'm going to kind of make an assumption about the question that you have something that you can get traction against, like a product or a service, like at least an MVP or something that is out in the world. And one thing that, okay, great. One thing that comes to mind is it's better to have 10 customers that love you than 100 customers that like you. So you're in this very like 0 to 1. Like I would not be paralyzed by the idea of scaling and growing huge. I would say, like, how do I find my very first customer? I don't need a channel that's going to get me $1 million or $100 million or like this or that. Like, just how do I find like one customer? And this is something that we used to say a lot at Zentel. Like, how do we find just like one customer? How do we find the one next customer? So if I would say, if you understand your customer and who they are and when to reach them and what the messaging that they need to hear in order to get excited about what you're offering, then just try and find the one. And it doesn't need to scale. So don't build process, don't build this or that. Just do the one, reach out to one person that you think is going to be the most excited about what you've built in the entire world and see what they say. And if they don't, then that's a good insight and signal to step back and ask yourself if you're ready to scale or not.
That's a great tip. Thank you, Paul, so much. I'm really interested by the last comment that Scuba Joe just popped in, which is you still haven't told us if that's your real name or not, Scuba Joe. But I do get what you're saying here. You're saying that they're all really lazy. They're saying beach bums, can't get out of bed most days. So
I mean, the way I'm reading into this, Scuba Joe, is that it's probably a nice to have. It's not, if this was solving a really deep pain for any stakeholder, really, like even a surfer bum or beach bum, then they would probably be more enthusiastic about it. So the fact that they're lazy and that you can't get them to engage is a signal. And I would really try and understand the why. Like, why isn't this getting them excited? Why aren't they taking action? Why aren't they adjusting a process or buying this or signing up for my service? I would step back and try and do some customer discovery with those beach bums and really understand if I'm offering something that's solving a real pain or unlocking a really big opportunity.
I love that, Paul. I think it's, that's also just a lesson. Entrepreneurship is such a deeply human endeavor, like especially with this whole customer discovery piece. Like you've got to be so interested in people. To your point, Paul, like you've got to be so curious. You've got to be really open-minded, and it's understanding humans, psychology, and on this whole laziness front, which I think is so, we could almost like kickstart a whole other hour's interview on that one. But it's the same goes for life. Like I'm having like frustrations with individuals in my life, and I'm like, they just don't care. Like it's the same with friendships, relationships, and it's kind of like they don't care enough, and you can't force people into that. It's like there's something about me, the business, the offering, there's something that's just not getting them excited, and I'm either we can see if there is something I can do to change it or move on to a more relevant target audience. So let me just read this message. Of course, Oh, okay, that's digging into Joseph's message. Let's continue the conversation in the community chat because I feel like this is going a bit deeper and I'm just conscious of time for everyone else, but I would definitely love to keep that conversation going. Thank you all, everyone. Scuba Joe, let us know your real name. This is a fantastic conversation. And yeah, I'd love to keep the conversation going in our Slack channel. So make sure that you've joined that on Slack. If you can't find it, then I think you can get in touch with maybe Samantha and she can help you get in there or something. And Paul, Scuba Joe's real name is Joe Gonzalez. So not, you've still got the Joe in there, which is great. I love that. Okay, amazing. All right, everyone, let's head
Great
over
questions.
to fantastic questions, everyone. Thank you so much for all that. Let's just head over to the quiz. So with the first one, so Paul, hallmark of a good business idea before you've got any validation. So I think you actually said 3 tips that have been put in as the 3 choices for the multiple choice options here. So we've got differentiation, large market, is it scalable? And do you have a thoughtful, clear value proposition? So I think all of those really are correct, aren't they, Paul? But what would you, if you had to choose one, what would you say would be the biggest one?
Those are all correct. Yes. There should be ideally an all of the above option, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
I think for me, it's a differentiation. It's like, is this really going to change how things are done today?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that's also the top choice. So if anyone went for option A, then we'll say that one's correct.
Any A, B, or C would be correct. So pat yourselves on the back if you answered it at all.
This is, do you know what? This is like the hugely empathetic. This is the empathy of one day. We all know how hard it is. We know how tough it is to be an entrepreneur. So that's where even in your multiple choice, we're giving you points. You're right on all of them. All right, next question. Paul, I asked you earlier, what is the best type of market research when it comes to early customer interviews? Can you remember your answer, or do you want me to read out the
I
multiple
remember.
choices?
Yeah.
Go on, go for it.
Open-ended,
What's the answer?
open-ended customer discovery.
Fantastic. That is again option A. Those are our questions. So we really hope that you got them all right, that you've paid attention throughout this whole chat. Paul, I've definitely learned lots from you as well in this discussion. So thank you so much for your time and being so generous and open with all of your knowledge. Let's continue the conversation over on the community Slack channel. Paul, are you on there as well?
I am. Yeah,
Amazing. All right.
Pigmate. Happy to chat. And Stephanie, thank you so much for having me. This was super fun, and thank you to all the audience and asking great questions too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Everyone, the next event is a book club event with Brian Meese, another fellow one-day mentor, all about how to be a founder. So hopefully see you there. You can scan that QR code. For now, though, thank you all so much for coming. Paul, thank you so much again.
Of course. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.